Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Welcome to What's New in Jewish Games. Excited to be here with the panelists. And I think we'll take a moment first to introduce ourselves. I am Avram. My pronouns he, him. I am a Hasidic Jew in the Holy Land of Brooklyn. And I design games. And being Jewish, they're Jewish. Anyone want to go next?
I'll go next. I'm Evan Torner, he, him, hailing from Covington, Kentucky, still in the Eastern Time Zone. And I am a professor of German studies as well as LARP write and Jewish role-playing game designer. Happy to be here.
Gabrielle. My pronouns are she, her. I also live in Brooklyn. I've been playing role-playing games for a number of years now, and only recently started getting very excited about writing my own. And it all kind of came out of a desire to share the Passover Seder experience with others and sort of turn it into a role-playing game experience. And so my entree into game designing, it comes from a very Jewish place.
Hi, I'm Adira Slattery. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a game designer, LARP writer, and poet just outside of Chicago in Skokie. I have been making games my whole life, and I love doing it Jewishly. Yeah, it's good shit.
My family's from Skokie, actually.
Okay, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like Jewish Central here in the Midwest. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just pick up on something you just mentioned, Adira. Like you said, you love doing it Jewishly. What does that mean to you? And how do you feel like that? What does that look like in your game designing?
To me, what a lot of that looks like is embracing like a number of different qualities, including like the specific sort of style of Jewish ritual, and how like things like that are outlined, and how can we take those sorts of things and pull them into game design, because a lot of like religious things is just a list of instructions effectively, and games are also often just lists of instructions. To me, a lot of also what like designing Jewishly is about interrogating and asking questions and arguing with myself, with the audience, with the text especially. As Jews, we have a long history of simultaneously agreeing and disagreeing with the written word, and I think it's very interesting when faced with the sort of broad society of people who will look at rules in a rule book and go, "Oh, this is like sacrosanct," and they don't need to be. What's it to you?
I completely agree. Like when you mentioned rituals, I mean, that's very much where my starting point was for this journey too. I was sitting around the Seder table with my family. That's, the Jewish holiday of Passover. We have a ritual meal. We tell a story in very specific ways. And I had just been playing a lot of role-playing games, and I was like, there's a lot of similarities here, just like you said. And I also thought that there were some strengths from role-playing games that we could bring into the Jewish tradition in terms of tools, right, and structures for telling stories in a way that's supportive for each other, and having useful arguments, maybe instead of like less useful ones. And so that's where I started with trying to create this game Manish Tana, which is just a role-playing game, but it's also a ritual telling of the Hebrew exodus from Egypt. And so, yeah, for me, both of those things, the rituals, and we have a mechanic called wait for interrupting productively, hopefully. And I just think, there's so much around that kind of joyous cacophony that can be brought into role-playing games too.
Avram, what about yourself? How do you feel you design Jewishly?
A lot of what I love about Judaism is the aspects of how everything has a holiness within it. Everything is important. Everything here is created for purpose, for reason, and that itself makes it holy. Um, and with that in mind, like the ordinary becoming important, the ordinary being sacred, all of these things around us being part of that. I feel like that really I want a lot to have in my game design as well. That just the everyday is special. These little aspects are important. Um, but also, like for me, a lot of it is that I would want to instill the sense of Jewish pride in a lot of things that I do, and highlight that. I think for a very long time, I know definitely with my grandparents and even my mother's generation, there was a lot of shame. There's a lot of persecution. There's a lot of embarrassment, and for me, like seeing this happening means so much to me.
We lost your audio.
Sorry about that. Having this panel and having Jewish games is so important to me because it is this whole part of my culture, my heritage, and our shared culture and heritage that people have very long time said, no, you got to melting pot and assimilate into these things. And I just love the fact that these games are coming out that are saying, nope, we're Jewish, and we're proud to be Jewish, and this is Jewishness in your face.
Hell yeah.
I think for me, what's important is radical acceptance. I grew up in Iowa amidst a bunch of Gentiles and did not have much of a Jewish community because my mom moved from Skokie to Iowa for her college education, and married a Gentile, and so the whole sort of kind of adriftness I felt as a secular Jew in the middle of Christian Christian Iowa then kind of was anchored through role-playing games. I was radically accepted by that community, and as I began to understand my Jewish heritage more as a teenager and as an adult, I began to radically accept them more. People come to role-playing games with all kinds of bodies, all kinds of identities, and it was actually Judaism that told me let's all sit down, break bread at the table, and kvetch, right? And to talk about whatever we'd like, and if the game isn't going the way we'd want to, then we can just stop it and talk about it, and that meta conversation is just going to be as enjoyable as the game itself. Also from the New England LARP community, I love a technique that is done called Brandicing a LARP, or live action role playing game, where you have a radically competitive secrets and powers game where everybody is pointed at each other and is competing for power, and you find a way to sort out everybody's differences and have a happy ending for everybody. It's sort of like a hacking of the scenario away from competition, and I wish we could Brandeis all competitive games, even though I understand, of course, the notion of competition being very important, but for me, Jewish game design is recognizing sort of the horrors of our past and the importance of working communally and cooperatively in the present.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So, yeah, we talked a little bit beforehand about like a few different sort of like Jewish game mechanics. There are games that will like use a dreidel as a randomization mechanic. A friend of mine wrote a game called Hanukkah Goblins that will use it. And I have Doikade right in front of me, which is a Jewish games anthology that I was a part of that has all sorts of and Dream Apart, which has all sorts of like Jewish mechanics. What did people feel like make mechanics feel Jewish?
Something that unfortunately we don't have the opportunity to do right now, but I think that, there's always the joke that, a Jewish holiday, Jewish food and things like that, but like having game mechanics centering around bringing people together to a table and eating together feels very Jewish to me. And like, please God, when we could have that again, but I really think that is definitely like the food mechanics, sharing food, sharing experiences, but even just the sharing of a person's story, and explaining where they come from and what they are, that all feels like very Jewish mechanics to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that I like about thinking about like Jewish mechanics and things like that is like not just taking things like, oh, here's this like dice and like it's got an olive on it or whatnot, but like the thing we were talking about around like pulling Jewishness into games, and like using games as like Gabrielle was talking about as like a way to like share those sort of like Jewish things with other people in that like wait mechanic from Mani Shana. Yeah, it's neat.
I think a Jewish mechanic is one that also brings social critique right into the game, makes it, visible and something that players and characters can also engage in. And here I'm thinking of Joshua A.C. Newman game Shock, which interfaces between some sort of technological thing, which could be a good thing, right? Technological innovation and the social problems that it directly interfaces with. And that to me also strikes me as a very Jewish design, the same way as Ben Rosenbaum's Dream Apart, where, you've got this utopian community. It's intentional. You've all decided to live together, but that doesn't mean that the problems have ended. Problems have started, and we're going to make sure that they're all in the game and they're never resolvable, rather than trying to, as we would say in role-playing speak, min-max your way out of it and create a space where you can insulate yourself with numbers. We know that that's not possible. You can only accept the community that you have, and you have to kind of say these social problems are not going to be resolved by me alone with my hero. So let's figure out how we manage it then. We have to manage the dystopia we have, rather than invent something that'll probably cause more damage.
Another point that comes to mind is we've just very briefly touched on, tradition and legacy, and I feel like that concept of being connected to a long history of people, a nomadic people who have undergone many traumas but survived, is so core to Judaism in my experience. And games that capture that, whether they're intentionally Jewish games or not, feel very Jewish to me. There's a game that Yona Sienna created for our Matzah Jam last year that's called In Every Generation. And you create characters, and it's sort of like a Cloud Atlas style, like they live many lives, many different Jewish lives. And to me, that's a game that really cuts right to the quick of that.
Yeah. I really like I totally lost the name of the game. Whatever. We can move on. Yeah.
I was
I guess
also thinking
no worries. Yeah, go ahead, Evan.
of Dybbuk from Doikite, right? Where you
Yeah.
are, your ancestors are not always a good thing,
That's
but you
right.
got to live with them. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, this, like, to Avraham's point about how valuable and how special this having this panel feels, and panels like it. I wanted to ask you all what you think about. Do you feel like there's a Jewish game design community? Like, do you feel like you are able to feel like a part of that, or what do you think we could do to grow that and to support other Jewish designers or people interested in Jewish game design? Where do you feel like it lives, or how do you feel like we are or could be creating that? I mean, I feel like we're making strides. Like, it feels like the beginning of something to me. And I don't know if that is shared by you all.
I think one of the interesting things about um, uh, Jewish communities is how disparate we can all be. And I think pulling like Jewish like role-playing game designers of various different backgrounds um, uh, like together is very neat. um, I I often talk to other Jewish designers in my own sort of weird, radical, queer space, um, and like things like Doikate came out of that from uh, Jr. and Riley trying to like sort of put some stuff together. But I think it is very interesting to like think about like what are next steps in like sort of creating an amount of like community. It would be get more Jewish perspectives on stuff. Yeah. Mhm. And
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I am definitely excited to see the future and more things coming out. But I think one thing that is special and it's just kind of built in within Judaism itself is this custom of minhag, the customs and the traditions that come from people. And so like there is this built-in part where it's just like I have my customs, I have the things that matter to me. People have everything else that is their custom. It's not mine, and it doesn't make it any less Jewish. It just
Mhm.
makes it different from mine. And I think that those things can be celebrated, can be appreciated, um, and still maintain this Jewish identity. And so, bringing those things together feels very important to me. Like, I definitely think that there has been a lack of from this early start, like Sephardic traditions that I've seen. There's just so much like flavors within that. The Persian Jews, Syrian Jews, each
Oh, we lost your audio.
sorry about that.
I heard
Uh,
Persian
e-
and Syrian Jews.
yeah, each one of them with a very rich and long tradition that I feel like their stories need to get out there. Their history needs to get out there. Um, so trying to pull that together, I think it really comes in very important that we are making space for these stories. We are creating opportunities for these stories. I was very grateful for the Matzah Jam that came out. That was an excellent opportunity. I'm grateful for moments like this, and I think as Jewish people come and say, "Well, I need to go out and start, telling these stories, getting these stories out there," I think it will awaken within them more people. Um, and yeah,
Yeah, I think your point about like various other perspectives speaks to sort of like the broader sort of a situation of like Ashkenormativity in a lot of like Jewish spaces. Like Dream Apart, fabulous game. Benjamin Rosenbaum, fabulous game designer. The game is very Ashkenazi. It's about like a very specific like period of time, and it's the only Jewish game that a lot of people know. Yeah. So
I
thank you for
think
bringing that up.
the celebration of this heritage and also the multifaceted heritage. You read the opening essays of Doikite and you realize, oh, like Jewishness is not even a monolith, and there are definitely not single strains of Jewishness out there. But those of us who came from a specific background, especially with North American kind of publishing experience and privileges, all where like you sort of laser lightning focus around the one that experience that everybody sees, that's very visible. So role-playing games have an opportunity to make visible and make playable even so many different other kinds of experiences. I mean, I think our narrow casted viewpoint on this has much to do with the heritage of the Holocaust, with colonialism, and with general silencing of Middle Eastern voices within wider North American and global narratives. And then, of course, like you're gonna just push the bar an inch at a time. You can't undo this automatically, but it'd be lovely if this was a space where more and more people from around the world feel safe to tell their stories and to experiment, to really say, well, how does my own personal form of storytelling manifest itself in this medium, and how can I bring that to other people? And it's going to look different, it's going to feel different, and we should welcome it rather than say, oh, that's weird, that's not a role-playing game, which is the community's usual reaction to new stuff.
Yeah, somebody already told me that Manishtana wasn't a game because you can't lose it, and I was like, oh, that's a whole other conversation that we're not going to get into. But yeah, maybe we can shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the kind of larger RPG sort of landscape, and why Jewish games feel urgent, like why bringing as many Jewish voices as we can into the conversation feels valuable. There are certain tropes, right? We're all, even within indie gaming writ large, you're fighting against tropes, and then Jewish games, right? Even more so. But what comes up for people around that theme?
I think where we're at is a very strange place. I think in 2016, a lot of those of us who had assimilated were reminded very viscerally through anti-Semitic propaganda from the highest corners of our media establishment that we were indeed Jewish. We would definitely be threatened by the regime that would come into power, and not only that, but that there are lots of multifaceted other people who are threatened as well, and that. And of course that's a certain sort of privileged position, but everybody's coming into it from a various points of view. So I think there was a wake up call about 5 years ago. Not being too fine point on what that is, but effectively that said, look, you do have to pick a side, and part of you picking the side is going back to your roots and understanding them, rather than trying to follow whatever the media establishment says your roots are, because they're going to get things radically wrong in ways that are aggravating, and you have to decide why does that piss you off, and what are you going to do now, right? And so I think we're still in that position right now, 2021, where we feel like there are extremely urgent issues we have to get out there. And part of that, has to do with fascism, straight up, global fascism across all these different countries. And part of it has to do with a deeper, I think, search for meaning, especially since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, where we really do want to say, what is nature to us? What is a larger, theological system to us? If I have to die on a, ventilator in a month, what is the divine to me? Right, and those it's very, very serious questions, right? That I don't think we as a traumatized, populace are able to grapple with. And I'm not just saying Jewish people are traumatized; I'm just saying everybody is. But that Jewish folk have had centuries of dealing with trauma publicly, and in both religious and secular contexts, and suddenly that material that we've always kind of been embarrassed about or think, oh, it makes Gentiles uncomfortable, so you don't want to bring it up. Actually, it's all extremely valuable and extremely important, especially now when so many things seem threatened. So I think that's my reasoning on that front. Not to get too philosophical.
I agree with the points about like self-reflection and how it relates to the pandemic and things like that. I know a number of people from a number of different backgrounds who, because of this, have been like, because of these like isolation pockets and the just amount of like self-reflection, have really been pushing forward like their own identities, and I think we are like very like well poised as a society to like be confronting a lot of those things, to like be like, everything is a little sort of off kilter right now, so just keep shoving, let's knock it all down, uh, like yeah, uh, that is maybe what feels the most like urgently Jewish to me right now, is like, don't let people go back to complacency. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that in a lot of ways, definitely, because like very much when we talk about fantasy, when we talk about role playing, when we talk about most genres, um, there is a very specific default. It's like the religion is Christianity. That's what it is, and it understands and sees the world through that lens. In a lot of games, a lot of fantasy, a lot of role playing games, it's just very much the default religion. And I think for me as a Jewish person playing role playing games, it gets uncomfortable. Like I can't play as a like paladin or like a religious oriented person in a game, even though religion is so very much important to my identity and to me. Um, and I lose out because of that. And so having that insertion of Jewish games, Jewish role playing games, Jewish identity uh, allows for.
Your sound.
Sorry about that. That allows for us to be able to disrupt that that aspect, and I think yes, for society for years has been trying to beat the Jew out of the Jew, and it's our job as Jewish people to stand strong in that and to put it into everything and everywhere we can, because that stops this racism. And it doesn't just stop it for one area, because a lot of the Jewish pride that came out was very much inspired by Black pride. There was a lot of the same kind of levels of discrimination, hatred. Black hair was ugly, Jewish hair was ugly. There all of these things. So the more we do to be able to fight against this, to say we don't have to be an assimilated person, we don't have to melt into the default of this Christian normativism, the more we can be able to tell stories out there and get stories out there that represent what our world really looks like, a diverse, beautiful place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it can be even more insidious than just saying Christianity is the default, because it's also other religions are evil. Like you're always fighting cultists, and it's like, I'm sure they're bad, but like that's the only other religion. Like it's like, you've got the good religion and the bad religion, and that's never really a good start.
Yeah, I want to say that if people watching this take one thing away, they should trouble the problem of there being magic and sorcery on the one hand over here, and miracles and God-related magic on the other hand. Or you have the clerics are over here and the mages are over here. Well, in Judaism, the sorcery is it's all sorcery, right? So there is no distinction, right, between what we consider to be miracles and what we consider to be magic. And in fact, sorcery or magic as a category was used to discriminate first against Jewish people throughout medieval Europe, and then when they ran out of Jewish people because they left or driven to places where they would not be persecuted, they went after women in witch hunts. And so the sort of normalization of magic as kind of just another system is bothersome when you think of this huge history of persecution and association of Jews with magic, and then also this artificial division between divine power and just magic power. So if you take one thing away, please trouble this in your game design and in your game running.
Also, even the like default sort of like polytheism of D&D is incredibly Christian. Like and there are very little like things that make like following Palor feel like a religion and like feel different from like you could just replace Palor with Jesus. Like fuck that gags.
I wanted to pick up on something Evan just mentioned in terms of like, and a call to other people watching this, what they can bring into their games. Like, what advice does everyone have for somebody? Like, you can either take it for a Jewish person or a non-Jewish person interested in, like you said, troubling and making good trouble with their game design and game playing.
I think for me, it's all about the question why. Like why are you doing things? Why, like, are you like, why was this written this way? Why do I feel this way when playing this game? Like why do I find this fun? Why do I not find this fun? And just like pushing to like get more information. Just why?
For me, a lot of that is making sure you have very good sensitivity readers for what you're doing. It's extremely important. I heard of like this movie that just came out that was focusing on Hasidic Jews, and they had an image of a classroom, a Jewish classroom in there, and the things they had in the Jewish classroom do not exist in any Jewish classroom that I sent my kids. And it just showed that this person through a neighborhood took a look at what was on the walls in the neighborhood and must be what's inside the place as well. Get a sensitivity reader and be able to make sure that you get it for the specific culture. There's so many flavors of Judaism. You need to know that it's not just one default.
I'd like to say that Jews are not just their oppression; they're not just victims. And Jewish agency might even look different than what you consider to be agency. In a very broad, sweeping sense, I did playtest several years ago a game in which there were a fantasy race that was analogous to the Jews and were treated as if they were Jews in sort of the shtetls of the 1900s, 1910s. And the game it didn't quite work because I didn't know what inner life or these were just you're like humans except you're oppressed by these other humans for nameless reasons. And I'm like, look, there's a long history of why the oppression happened, but also a long history of really great stuff that Jewish people have brought to communities. Let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate food. Let's celebrate music. Let's celebrate religious ritual. Let's celebrate bathing, right? Which all of these things are often sidelined in sort of the genre plot lines. Let's bring them back in, and really relish in that sensuality, but also in reminding ourselves like this culture is a living, breathing thing that people care about, and not just a stand-in for whatever social issue you'd like to talk about.
What about you, Gabrielle?
Yeah, I mean, I think you all spoke really well to it. I would say, read, immerse yourself, or like whatever form, whatever kind of media consumption you prefer. Consume narratives like in own voices, right, written by Jewish people about their experiences. Um, you know, I'd have to look up the name of the book and share it again, but I've been playing 10,000-Year-Old Vampire, that solo journaling RPG, and I've been telling the story of a Jewish woman vampire started off in a shtetl in Ukraine in the 1500s, and I'm tracing her life as a vampire, and it's been an incredible journey for me of research, of as every time time jumps forward in that game, I need to dive into you know I'm googling I'm on Wikipedia, and I feel like I'm learning so much even about my own past. And so there's just such a wealth of information out there, and even if there aren't that many Jewish RPGs, there's so much Jewish media that you can consume, and I mean like written by Jews, not about Jews, by non-Jews, that you can use to learn before can feel ready to start creating yourself, I would say.
Yeah.
At this point, yeah, we can ask Stephanie if there are any questions from the Twitch, and we can see if we can answer those Twitch chat questions.
Excellent. Well, we have some terrific questions from the Twitch chat. First up, how do you all feel that your specific Jewish denominations have contributed to your design and approach?
A direct line from my literal religious practices in my family growing up. I was raised conservative Jewish, but by parents who, like, in both of their families, there was some modern Orthodox, and then kind of some family members became less observant, and then some became more. And by the time it got to my family, neither of my parents were raised that observant. But the Hebrew school I ended up going to was a conservative Hebrew school. So I ended up learning more about Jewish observance than my parents even had in their practice. Like, I can read Hebrew and neither of them can, for example. But our family practiced, the Passover Seder. We would read, excuse me, so we would read the Haggadah mostly in English because most of my family, or not everyone in my family, spoke Hebrew. And we would often just use like whatever, like those Maxwell House Haggadot that, they're the free ones that you just get. And so it really felt incomplete. Like, it really felt like we were doing just like a gloss, and we would kind of always get bored and get annoyed. Like, why are we focusing on this and not this other thing? And we would also, though, go to my Orthodox cousin's Seder, and theirs was different. They brought a lot more scholarship into the conversation. I was always impressed by that. And so when I came to making this game of Manish Chana, I think I was drawing on both of those experiences, both what I loved and didn't love about my own, holiday experiences, and then what I appreciated also about others that I had participated in.
Yeah, I mean, my own Jewish denomination heavily influenced my approach to game design. I was raised Reform, but in a very, very Jewish area, surrounded constantly by Orthodox, by modern Orthodox, Lubavitchers, anything. Um, and uh, a big thing to me is like when I was in high school, a lot of the kids like stopped going to Hebrew school after getting a B'nai Mitzvah, and I met with the rabbi every week for like 4 years, and we just studied Genesis for 4 years because there's quite a lot there, and there's quite a lot of commentary. And my rabbi, whenever she would give a sermon, is constantly giving citations within it and referencing things beyond just Jewish texts, and might talk about movies and like all sorts of wild things, um, pulling it all back. And so it was just the consistency of like interrogation and uh, like uh, knowing where your opinions come from. Yeah, I feel like it's made me a very intentional designer.
I think for me, it really helps me know where my boundaries are, I think, because I can only design by my perspective of my Judaism and my cultural heritage. And so, like, even within, the Hasidic community, that's a huge span of different traditions, different customs, different ideas, different um, text. And so I know that when I am presenting something, it's very much filtered through this is kind of Judaism according to, Lubavitcher. So it's Judaism as filtered through Chabad Hasidus. So I think that allows me to have a breadth of history that's connected to there, but it also puts it in a very specific focus, I just have to be very honest with myself to remember that that is my focus and to know that that's where my boundary.
I guess for me, again, I'm a secular Jew who not only grew up in Iowa, but grew up with multi-generational secular Jewishness, which is like I was sitting with my grandparents at a bat mitzvah during the whole readings of Hebrew, and we were just like, what is this crap? We don't care about any of this. And to sit there with my grandparents falling asleep in that ceremony was eye-opening. That was the moment where I was like, none of us care about this shit. That's why I don't care about this shit. Okay, good. And it was just this radical epiphany where like on the one hand you could say, oh, the immigrant experience is about assimilating and here's all those things you lose. And on the other hand, they were just actively not interested in it, but fiercely tied to community. So of course you didn't care so much about the religion, but you protected other Jews. You found who they were, and you knew that you had kind of an invisible college of allies. And I began to think about that in terms of my influences in my own art. So the role playing doesn't come from Gary Gygax. It came the guy who invented the word role playing or Rollenspiel is a guy named Jacob Levi Moreno, Romanian Jew who moved through Austria and then to the United States. Look him up. Psychotherapist, invented the term role playing psychodrama and incidentally social network analysis. Boom. Okay. I watched Otto Preminger's Exodus while growing up, and Billy Wilder and Ernst Lubitsch and all these kind of classic film directors, and I'll go, okay, they're all Jewish. Jack Kirby, created all the Marvel characters you love. He's Jewish too. So I said, actually, there's this huge body of Jews everywhere, especially in the entertainment industry, who are very careful with their craft and are communicating with me across generations. And so, a lot of my own work is based on films or based on impressions of films, and also the idea of just not taking yourself too seriously. It's whatever you're doing is fine, and people will say some shit, and you just sort of brush them off or whatever. But then you radically care about them. If they are sick, you bring them a bagel. If you are if they're down and out, then you support them, and that's where sort of my own position comes into both the role-playing design, but also the communities.
Have any more questions, Stephanie?
Many. Corbino asks, what would a magic system with underlying Jewish assumptions look like to y'all? And we have kind of a stack of these questions about magic and Jewish traditions. So I'm going to kind of group them together because A Fool and His Folly also asked, what suggestions do you have for Kabbalah in games? And Phil Bricado speaks about intentionally not putting real magic traditions and practices in Mage, and what do you think about the portrayal and use of Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism in games? So kind of that it's a stack of questions we've got for you about those very specifically Jewish mystical traditions, and how would you how would that go back and forth with magic systems in games?
I think going back to what I said earlier about having sensitivity readers regarding it, that's extremely important because this is, you know, Kabbalah, mystical interpretations, mystical traditions. All of those things have a real life practice. It's not something that's just like exists or existed or an ancient text that is now being found. People are still doing this. People still have these things as a basis for their Jewish practices. And so being very careful about that. And I think it's also very important to have an understanding of Judaism's view of the mystical. Like for a lot of cultures, I think mysticism exists, you know, somewhere up there maybe, and somewhere maybe down there, but that's not the practice of Judaism. Mysticism and the divine, which is kind of what it kind of comes down to, exists everywhere within us and everything we do. Judaism has procedures and things that
Your sound.
Nope. Okay, there we go. Judaism has these things and procedures that we do in every single daily part of our life. And I think if you're going to be doing something within Jewish mysticism, understand that it is outside of our normative ideas, especially magic exists sometimes in the spectrum of good and evil. Judaism thinks the only evil that really exists is what the humans do and our decisions on how we want to do things within our lives. So tread carefully.
Yeah. I incorporate some Kabbalah into the like practices that I do as a Jew. And I've been a sensitivity reader for a few different games, and some of them have done it very well, and some of them have done it very poorly. And the ones that did it very well were the ones that were written by Jews, unfortunately. People who are not Jewish can write Jewish themes and have Jewish stuff in their game incredibly well and do it super great and knock it out of the park. Um, uh, and I think just thinking about that sort of like intentionality, of like remembering what Avram said about how it is still things that people do in their lives. So yeah.
Reinforce the point made earlier that there shouldn't be a separation between your magic system, the divine, and also nature magic, right? I was thinking about the clerics versus the mages and the druids in the world's most popular role-playing system, and how that distinction cannot exist in Judaism. That the spirits in stones are this, in dialogue with the spirits of your ancestors that are also the very thing that helped make magic work. And I think the other thing that's really important is names and language are power, and so especially if you're depicting cults, and cults are using mysterious languages and symbols that are portrayed in a particular way. Maybe stop using cults in the same way you always get, because it's always like, this is religion that is being formed that is probably toxic. Whereas I say, why don't we look at the toxic social system that produced that group formation in which they are now killing people, rather than condemn their whole religious inclination? Because unfortunately we don't design in a vacuum. We design with a multi-thousand year history kind of weighing on us, and And part of that weight is past persecutions, but also who does the persecuting. And for those who are tuning in, obviously the magic is what you accuse others of, so that then you can persecute them. And so I'm very, very much about how do you actually integrate it into society? How do you make it much more matrilineal so that women are at the center of that magical practice, and that also it is it mixes between what you would consider to be the divine and the nature. All these different artificial divisions are actually harmful and antithetical to Jewish thinking.
Sorry, I think my Wi-Fi glitched for a minute. But yeah, I don't really have too much to add. I feel like my fellow panelists really covered this pretty extensively. So I'll just say, like, yep, what they said.
Okay. All right. Puppy Lover 12397 asks, what Jewish games would you recommend? And then we do have one question when you when you do your outros, which when you like say goodbye and tell us who you are, to remind us where to find you, please also answer the question that Namer98 has posed. I think just to start like a very, very Jewish argument, because the question that we'd like you to answer on your way out is Hamantaschen or Latkes. But before that, what Jewish games would you recommend?
Go to itch.io, click browse, do a little drop down to physical games, go into where it says tag, type the word Jewish, all of them. Yeah. If you're a Jewish designer watching this and you didn't realize that you can just enter in whatever word you want to itch to tag your games, you don't need to use their tags. You can just type in Jewish. If you like want like specific games, go there and just see the ones that like call out to you, because I'm sure some of them will. That's my thought.
Solo journaling games have become really, valuable to me, and I'm sure so many others during this time of social isolation. And there's one that I really love. I actually have it here. It's called Mud, a golem memoir. And I know that golems are like overplayed, and it's usually like the one kind of go-to Jewishy thing that like gets in the monster manuals or whatever. And of course, it's so often misunderstood and not any kind of based on tropes. And I think this small, beautiful book really brings new life into this story. And it's by Hannah Schaefer and Evan Rowland, Turtle Bun, and I highly, highly recommend it.
There's also the Dream Apart part of Dream Askew, Dream Apart, which is simulates shtetl life in an interesting fashion. So this is again commercially available between Avery Alder and Benjamin Rosenbaum, and I really like the fact that half the book is about building queer community in adverse conditions, the other half is a bit about building Jewish community in adverse conditions. I also want to shout out to the many Jewish LARP creators out there whose games are probably not published, but one is The Last Satyr by Susan Weiner, Vito d'Augusta, and Nat Boudin. It's just a really beautiful, secretive science fiction Seder LARP, which I guess it has the Haggadah and everything that you go through and have a real Seder meal. And there's also lots of mystery, time travel.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all these points. I think what I would say is, like, if you don't see the Jewish version that looks like you, I challenge you and obligate you to make it.
And then I guess, do we have? Is it next Hamantaschen versus Lakas? Is that the final debate?
That's the final debate. We have about 6 minutes, so please also tell us tell us again where to find you, and I'll put those links in the chat as well. But definitely, we want to know. This is the burning question in the chat right now. Is yeah, Hamantashen or Lactis?
Okay, I'll go first. I'll bite the bullet. So yeah, once again, my name is Gabrielle. My pronouns are she, her. I'm right now just wrapping up beta for my game Manishana. Why is this night different? That I've created with my cousin Ben Bisogno. The link will be in the chat. We're going to be kickstarting it soon, and so we hope you all follow us along on that journey. And as far as the Hamantashen versus latkes, I have very different relationships to both of those foods, and I love them both very much. Hamantashen, I think, the reason is that I'm the one who makes the latkes for Hanukkah now, that my grandmother has passed away. Somehow that responsibility is passed on to me. I must have foolishly said I would do it once, and now, now it's always me. So when I think of latkes, I think of a labor, but also feeding my family. So I have a lot of love with that. But Hamantashen I don't make, so I just buy them and someone else makes them for me. So I also like that. And as long as it's apricot, then I don't know. I love them both for different reasons.
I'll go next. I'm Evan Torner, he, him. You can find me on Twitter at Guy in Black Hat, or I co-founded the Golden Cobra contest, so we're announcing the winners tonight, and then a academic journal called analoggamestudies.org, again, which with two of the three of us who founded it are Jewish, so I don't know if that means anything. But I'm a latkes person, and I'm gonna also one up and say matzah brie. Matzah and eggs, you can't really beat it, and especially in lots of oil. They'll give you my grandma.
Well, are you a sweet or a savory matzah brie eater? That's the real fight.
Yeah, that's right. You hit the nail on the head, and I got addicted as a kid to pouring syrup on it, and so I am a sweet matzo brie
Same.
eater. But yeah, I had to stop and say this is actually a debate that's very hot. So I don't want to say I'm taking a side here, just what I'm used to.
Hi, I'm Adira Slattery. You can find me on Twitter at Adira Slattery, or you get my Adira.io. I'm trans Jewish game designer just outside of Chicago, and Hamantashen all the way. Yeah, I love the basically anything you can put in them. I love to make them. It's Hamantashen all the way. Plus, it's fun to eat a symbol of a guy who tried to kill you. That's neat.
Thank you all for coming. Really love this panel. My name is Avram Yosef Baez, he, him. You can find me on Twitter, Avrlog, Avrlogg. From there, you could find my itch account and see my games there. I'm currently working on a game about labor relations called Trapped, which uses the events of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, which is also very Jewish, to talk about labor. And that one, unfortunately, mechanics only work in person, but hopefully that'll be coming back soon. And I'm going to take a very Jewish cop-out for this, but what I view as a very right cop-out is the fact that every food that we eat during the holiday is the food we need for that holiday. Going back to this concept of Jewish mysticism, on those holidays, you specifically need those because they accomplish something for that holiday.
I like it.
Also, shout out to Stephanie and for Joe for both moderating and providing the technical support to make this happen. We couldn't have done this without you, as well as to Avi and Vinny and the whole Metatopia crew who've been working just absolutely long hours to make this happen. If you like this panel, if you like some of the other panels, send them $5 in official registration, please.